Hello everybody, welcome to a Big Game Indicating Dogs Q&A. Trying a new format. I'm going to do one question at a time, cut them up like that. So this question is from Andrew. G'day Paul, dog training around home. Dog obeys all commands. When I go bush, a lot of commands go out the window because there's too much else going on. How do I rectify this? So he's training around home. The dog obeys all its commands. He goes out in the bush and a lot of the commands go out the window because there's too much else going on. So in the blueprint, we do lots of training away from home. These are mine. I've got a lot of notes on this. In the blueprint, we do tons of training away from home, man. So I don't even know. And I actually asked you here. I asked straight back. This is a question from the inner circle. I asked Andrew straight back, how old's your dog? How much hunting have you done? How much training have you done? I asked him quite a few questions. This is quite a short, sweet question, but it's a really good question and it raises a lot of really important points. So in the blueprint, we do tons of training away from the house. You know, we do training in the bush, and that's one of the most important reasons for doing that is you can't just train a dog on the back lawn and get it going really good on the back lawn with stop, go, come, gunfire and all of that stuff in that one spot, that one place, that one environment, and then take it out in the bush and expect it to hunt properly. It's going to be pretty overwhelmed the first time it gets in the bush. It's going to be all over the place. It may not even be overwhelmed, might not be the right word. That's definitely a possibility in certain circumstances. It may be overwhelmed, it may be excited, it may be distracted. More often than not, it's going to be a combination of the three, and that's why we do so many different things. In the blueprint, we start our training on the back lawn with our puppy when it's like 4 weeks old and it's super chill. And then by the time it's about, did I say 4 weeks old? 8 weeks old? Yeah, for the first week. I can't even talk. For the first 4 weeks, we train at home on the back lawn, starting with an 8-week-old puppy. By the time it's 12 weeks old, we're carefully taking it out into a bigger area and teaching the puppy to walk out in front. And then by the time it's 3, 4, 5 months old, we're taking it out and taking it for careful short walks in the bush in an easy spot. And then we start introducing it to obstacles and water and river crossings. We start increasing the distraction on the stop. We do non-target species aversion training. We do introduction to cows and big animals. In the blueprint, I show you how I take Print on big drives to different towns and parks and on the beach. You know, and all of this is not only to teach the dog how to handle all of those different things in isolation, but it also gets the dog used to lots of different situations and they learn to still listen in all of those different situations. You're actually building the character of your dog. You know, and we do it all really carefully, step by step, all the way through. You can't just train a dog around home and then take it hunting and expect it to listen. You know, a good example of this that I saw lately, someone asked a question on a hunting Facebook page about bird dogs, and they were saying something about, and again, it was lacking a bit of context. The question, he didn't say exactly what he was trying to do with the dog. He didn't say how old the dog was. He didn't say how much training he'd done with the dog. He didn't say exactly what he was trying to do, but the rough question was, what's the best way to camouflage my dog out in the field? My dog doesn't really like a layout blind or like a dog blind. And he didn't really explain what sort of dog blind he was using or what. And I just answered the question the best I could. I just answered it in the context of exactly what I've done with Miko, which has worked really, really well, which is I use a proper dog blind, a little dog blind. It's just like this little pop-up tent thing with flaps on each end. You can actually Velcro the flaps open, or you can just leave them hanging down. I leave the flaps hanging down, and Miko she'll actually hide in it pretty freaking well. She's sort of, you look back and you can just see a tiny bit of her nose sticking out, and she's looking out through the gap. But when birds come in, and particularly when birds come in, I shoot a bird and I hit it. As soon as I'm up out of the blind and shooting, I've seen it because I've set up the camera on it, like on a wide view from back far away, and it's got Miko's blind just in the edge of the shot, and me and all the birds and shooting and stuff. And a bird comes in, I'm swinging, and as soon as I bust out of the blind, and if she'll just stick her head out, basically the minimum amount that she has to. It's like she knows she's hiding in the blind. And it's funny, there's a shot there, I shoot a paradise duck, and they're tunning it through from left to right, and Miko's over my right shoulder, and this bird goes way out to the right, and I hit it. I actually took 2 shots at it. And on the edge of the video shot, it's funny, because Miko can't see it from just peeking out the little gap, she actually sticks her head right out of the blind and sits up and looks around to mark this bird that I've shot falling right over into the other paddock. But that's all trained. All of that there is all trained, and it all starts first off from a really good foundation of training. Like if you just try and take, and it's what happens so often, right? People barely even train the dog, and then they're just out in the field getting frustrated. Like, why won't my dog do this? Why won't my dog do that? And the dog's been silly, or the dog's been a pain in the ass, or the dog's not listening, or the dog doesn't like it. But they haven't even trained for it, and they just take the dog out, and they're trying to figure it out while they are hunting, which is like the biggest stuff up in hunting dogs, period. Like, and there's that old school saying, like, oh, it's just time out on the hill, man. Just take them hunting and they pick it up. That's terrible advice. If you're trying to give someone a very high chance of having a really good dog and a very low chance of having like serious stuff ups and making bad habits and issues and problems, and it's just terrible advice. And no one that has ever been good at training dogs has done it that way. Period. Like, it's just like not consistently, like a professional or someone that helps other people professionally, or like professional trainers, top dog people. Doesn't matter what discipline it is. They don't just start doing the thing. It's all, like, if you just put all bullshit aside and really study dog training, and I've spoken about this in Q&As at length a number of times, but when I first started wanting to work it out properly for myself, well over 10 years ago now, after already being around dogs since I was a kid, so you're talking, after being around dogs for sort of 25 years, hunting with dogs for 20 years, I still didn't really know how to do it, but I'd worked out enough to know that I didn't know how to do it. And then but I knew other people did. And when I started looking into it, I was like, what the hell? Because everyone that was actually like really good at it, like I'm talking sheepdog trial champions, professional bird dog trainers, people that train champion field trial bird dogs, Basically anyone like worth a shit that is really good at training dogs, they're all talking about training right from a pup, doing everything really deliberately and systematically, and training for like a year, 2 years, 3 years. And I just went, oh, we were so far off. Like what the average punter, I think it's getting better now, but we've still got a long way to go if we're talking collectively. But, and I still get shit for saying, oh, I think it's actually a good idea to train for a year. And people that haven't worked it out yet are like, man, he talks about training a dog for a year. Well, that's what you do. That's not even heaps. Like, and you could easily train for 2 years, 3 years. And that some of the breeds that people are using, that's actually where the history and the lineage of those breeds were bred by people that bred them to be trained for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Like old school traditional pointer training is like a multi-year deal. And it's not just like run a few drills on the back lawn for a while and then take the dog hunting. That's not training a dog. And like, man, this is just instantly turned into a mega rant, and this isn't aimed at you particularly, Andrew, because I don't even have the context on what you've done with your dog and stuff like that. I asked you there, but you hadn't. So this is just in general on this topic. Like, my dog obeys commands at home on the back lawn, and I took it hunting, and everything goes out the window. How do I rectify this? Pretty much always, it's way more training, and you haven't done enough training. And to ask that question in that way, you just need more training, man. And in all of the different environments, properly, repeatedly, consistently, over and over, and be patient and let the dog age. And if it's a GSP or a Vizsla or something like that, it might be difficult until it's 2 or 3 years old. And having said that though, if you're really doing it properly and you really have committed to it and doing it all properly, we've had loads of people hunting with GSPs and Vizslas and whatever breed you want when they're like 8 or 10 months old. But those people have gone all out, like really hooked in, and that's why, like in the blueprint, we do it for weeks and weeks on end. We get the dog to a certain point that it's all walking out in front, and we've got all our commands and communication and dialogue and stuff, and then exactly for this reason, we start taking the dog out into the bush in not hunting, in a training scenario. And I do it on a track. Like, so the dog's got this defined path to walk, and I put the dog in front, and it's all very slow and tedious and funny. And we train like that, and then we do sessions of that, like weekly for weeks, and then we take the dog off the track, all carefully and tediously, so we've done that, and we do all our river crossings and obstacle work, and keep going back to the bush, backwards and forwards, round and round, backwards and forwards, over and over, until everything's just smooth and like clockwork. And the dog is listening to us when we're out in the bush. You've got to do all of that stuff, and you've got to do enough of it. You can't. That's exactly what happens, man. If you don't do enough, and you don't do it to a high enough level, you'll just have issues. Like going back to the dog blind example, if someone just sort of has a dog, gets a lab pup, and, you know, does a bit of training, few stop drills here and there as it grows up, and does a few retrieves with it, goes and throws a dummy and sort of gets it bringing a dummy back, not too bad most of the time, does a bit of introduction of gunfire, you know, shooting guns in the paddock by the house or whatever, and just really roughly, like a real rough beginning, doesn't do retrieve training properly, doesn't do holds, doesn't do work on your delivery, doesn't do introduction of gunfire properly, doesn't work your way up through all the different dummies and water retrieves and all of that properly, just roughly, and, you know, half-assed job of training a bird dog, and then just tries to take it out on opening morning and people are shooting everywhere and birds are going everywhere, and you're trying to put it in a dog blind for its first time on its first hunt. It's not going to go well, and the dog's going to clam up and quote unquote not like its layout blind. But if you do, and again, you know, proper retriever training, even like trying to do it quickly, is still weeks and months of training, 5 or 6 days a week, like with a fully trained dog. Like take a blueprint dog that's like 2 years old, got all its stop, go, come, introduction of gunfire, scent work, like all of that stuff from the blueprint, which is a lot. Trying to train that, you know, it's really, all bullshit aside, 6 or 8 months. You'd be better off doing it for a year. That's just adding just retrieving to a fully trained dog. Doing your hold properly, or your deliveries, your multiples, blinds, back and sides, and like once you, and then that's do the blueprint for a year or 18 months, and then do the bird dog stuff for a year or 18 months. And if we're talking about this blind thing, like, and then if you try and skip that and just like buy a dog blind the day before opening morning, and then just take it down Saturday morning, set it up and tell the dog to get on it, the dog's going to have no idea what to do. And it's just going to be this big weird curveball on opening morning. But if in all your step-by-step training at home, like several times for several sessions, you pull your dog blind out, set it up, you've already got your dog on a dog bed or a blanket, or it knows like on your bed. That's a command that's taken ages to set up previously, and you point in there and do it in like a chill environment at home, not stacked on top of all of these different things. One thing at a time. And you get your dog going in the dog blind at home, and it's all chill, and just practice it and put a dog bed in there and say on your bed, and the dog gets in there and you pat it and good dog. And then you let it come out, and then you say on your bed, and you practice it until it gets on there and in there and does it properly and likes it, and it's a positive thing. And then you do that like 3 days a week for a month or more, until you pull the bed out and you just say on your bed, and the dog just happily jumps in there and it knows exactly what's going on. And then you go out and put half a dozen decoys out, get your duck caller and your clapper or your shotgun and a dummy. That's probably all too much all at once as well. You could do it more incrementally than that. Ditch the dog blind and just put out half a dozen decoys and run some retrieves with the dog running through the decoys, some field decoys. Do some water retrieves or some decoys on the water. Do some water retrieves with a clapper and then slowly add things, and then take the dog blind out into the field or the paddock or your back lawn and do some work there, and then run some real easy retrieves out of the blind, and then run some real easy retrieves out of the blind with the decoys once it's used to those two things in isolation, and then run some retrieves out of the blind with the decoys with the duck caller until it's sweet with all of that. And then do it with the clapper, blind, decoys, duck caller until it's sweet with that. And then add shooting later on. Once it's already okay with shooting, which by the way is its own big thing in its own, keep adding. If you do all of that systematically backwards and forwards and work on each thing in isolation and then get them all running together, so by the time it comes to opening morning, the dog, and then go do that down by the river or down by the pond. By the way, if you're using a layout blind, you want the dog to know what your layout blind, and you want the dog used to you getting in that and it getting in its blind behind you, and you can throw a retrieve from there and fire the gun and run retrieves and put decoys out. Then you want to go do that, like I say, down by the pond or the river, out in the paddock, in different places, until it's just this fun, awesome game for the dog. On top of that, you've been doing retrieves with a decoy, dummies with feathers tied to the side, then whole wings tied to the side, then with a dead pigeon, a small bird first, and then with a dead duck, a bigger bird. And you've got the dog, so you don't, because that can be a thing too. Picking up a dead bird is different to picking up a rubber dummy. And that could be a sticking point on opening morning, on top of 400 other things that the dog will be experiencing for the first time unless you do it all properly. And you should have it all set up so the dog's used to that whole series of events. So come opening morning, you go down, set up your blind, the dog knows what's happening, knows what the blind is, it's watching the decoys go out, its blind's going up, you're getting in your blind, you say on your bed, and it gets on its bed and it's sitting there waiting, and then a duck comes in, bang, you shoot it, splash, and the dog's just poised like ready to go. Holy shit, it's never seen a duck get shot, but it's done this whole thing a lot of times before, and it's fetched dead birds before, and you say, away you go, and it goes and fetches its first duck, happy as, give it a pat, back on your bed, it gets back in the blind, happy as, it's waiting again. You know, that's how you do stuff properly. You know, and it's exactly the same with, that's just like an analogy or an example, that whole bird dog thing. But it's exactly the same with the deer dog, and all of that stuff's in the deer dog blueprint. If this question's come from the inner circle, so you've got the blueprint. It's all in there, man. Like over and over, miles and miles of it, all of that stuff. What I went through, lots of training away from the house, lots of training in the bush, rivers, obstacles, scent work, increasing distraction on the top, stop, non-target species aversion training, introduction to cows, going on big, in the blueprint, I go on big drives places and go to a river here and a creek there and the bush there and a beach there and different parks and all over the bloody place. So that question, the dog training around home, the dog obeys all commands. Go bush, a lot of commands go out the window because there's too much going on. How do I rectify this? You do all of the training. You don't just train the dog around home and then go. And you're saying go bush, a lot of commands go out the window. It's basically what I go over in the blueprint when I'm going over introduction to bush for the first time. And with Print, we had that hard case thing where the first time I took him in the bush, he saw a log and he could obviously smell something, or something was going on, and he saw this log and he was all clammed up, and it's all tedious, and I'm waiting on behind him and I'm letting him work it out, and he wouldn't go up to it, and I had to go over and step over him and call him to it and then show him it, and then this big silly thing, you know, but he's just a pup. And that's like one of his first times in the bush in the new environment. So you can basically guarantee it's not going to go perfectly, and that's why we do it in that controlled, structured, step-by-step way to get it all done properly. And that's why proper training is so important, because to just take a dog hunting without doing all your proper training is just, it's what I said before, it almost guarantees issues, you know. And there's that old thing of, oh, you just take them hunting, mate, or it's just time on the hill, bro. Like I saw one a while ago, and a guy was saying, oh, I took my dog hunting and he spooked a stag and chased it. How do I stop my dog from doing that? And he literally said in the question, or it might have been in the comments from that question, I know some people talk about training dogs for ages, but I just don't have the time for that. So he'd asked, how do I stop my dog? Like you could you could paraphrase that and just go, my dog's untrained and it's acting like it when I take it hunting. How do I get it to act like a trained dog without training it? Like, and I know I'm being a bit of a dick there, and I'm sort of joking and being facetious, but you know what I'm saying? I think you get my point. And you definitely, if you listen to plenty of Q&As and watch the blueprint, and it's like, my dog's not listening. How do I make it listen? It's you could change the wording and say, my dog's not trained. How do I make it act like it's trained? Well, you train it. And yeah, I just don't know how else to answer this without just bullshitting and skirting around it and stuff. Like, and I've had this rant over and over in the podcast before, so there it is again. Thanks, Andrew, for your question. And again, like, that's not directed at you specifically. It's just your question has brought up that whole subject. And it's really important, man, and it just comes up over and over again. And you know, it's not, if your whole perception and mindset about dogs and dog training is like way over there at the just take it hunting, bro, when the other far extreme end of it is a professional dog trainer, like on an estate in England, who's training pointers for 3 years. Like that's the two extreme ends of the scale, you know, and man, you've definitely got to be somewhere in the middle or towards the top end of that. Like, it's not 3 years. You don't have to train for 3 years. But then again, you know, I think everything done, like Miko was a bit of a handful until she was 2. She really was. And now that she's like 4 now, if I hadn't have made mistakes with her, she would have been pretty freaking good at 3. Now that she's 4, she's getting pretty interesting now, you know? And that's with a few mistakes and actually a lot of time in between both not training and not hunting too. But, you know, Print was hunting well by the time he was 15 months old. And again, we've had loads of people. I mean, I've started dogs when they're 7 months old, some of the best dogs I've ever had. But I'm just rambling now. But long story short, you've got to train, man. You've got to, and you've got to do enough of it. And if you start, that's one of our principles. If you run into a problem, you've got to take a step back take a step back in the system. Like if you've done a bit of training, done a bit of stuff, take the dog in the bush, it's not really listening, commands go out the window. You've got to go back and look at the system and go, what do I need to work on more? Because if stuff's going out the window, you're obviously not there yet. Done.